$620,000. That's how much my son threw away. The money from the sale of a house that I had helped him buy with the last of my own savings. All of it just vanished, blown on glittering jewelry, extravagant trips, and his wife's bottomless debts. And when they were flat broke, they showed up on my doorstep, begging for a place to stay. I said no. And then, right there on the porch of the home I'd spent my life building, in front of my neighbors, my daughter-in-law raised her hand. A sharp, dry smack echoed in the quiet air. It was a slap not just on my cheek, but on a mother's broken heart. My son, the boy I sacrificed everything for, just stood there, frozen. That was the day I started to fight back. My name is Eleanor Vance. At 70 years old, I thought I knew my son. I thought the stormy days of my life were long behind me. I was wrong. The biggest battle of my life had just begun. Stick with me through this story, and you'll see what a lone old woman can do when she's backed into a corner. And you'll learn the terrible truth hidden behind the lies of the very child I brought into this world. To make sure you don't miss what happens next, follow my story as it unfolds. October in Maple Creek has always been the best time of year. The crisp air carries the scent of pines from the hills and the smell of damp earth after an overnight rain. That morning, like every morning for the 5 years since my husband, Robert, passed away, I started my day in a familiar quiet. The early sun slanted through the living room window, painting long stripes of light on the oak floors I'd so carefully polished. I was meticulously watering the geraniums on my windowsill, their bright red blooms my small comfort. This house, every brick, every plank of wood, was soaked in my husband's and my sweat and memories. Now it was my sanctuary, my fortress of peace. Then a jarring, unfamiliar sound tore through the silence. The growl of a luxury car engine, followed by the crunch of gravel under its tires as it pulled right up into my driveway. I frowned, setting the watering can down. Here in Maple Creek, folks drive old pickup trucks or modest sedans. A shiny black SUV, big and arrogant, was completely out of place. My heart gave a little squeeze when I realized it was Arthur's car, my son. The car door opened and Arthur got out. The mother in me felt a vague, sharp pang of sorrow. My son, the boy I had raised with all my love, looked haggard. His expensive business suit was rumpled as if he'd slept in it, and the dark circles under his eyes looked like bruises. But what hurt me the most was his gaze. He deliberately avoided looking at me, a gesture I knew all too well. It was a sign of shame or of hiding something. Following him was Chloe, his wife. She was the opposite, still clinging to a veneer of perfection. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled, her makeup flawless, but the tension was plain to see in her tightly pressed lips and the way she scanned my house as if she were appraising a piece of property. They came inside, bringing a cloud of chaos and unease with them. Arthur collapsed onto the sofa his father had loved so much and let out a heavy sigh. Chloe began her performance, her voice dripping with drama as if she were recounting some great tragedy. "Mom," Chloe began, her blue eyes looking up at me, trying to appear pathetic. "Something terrible has happened. We had to sell the house in Burlington." I was stunned. That house, the house I had drained $40,000 from my own retirement savings to help them with the down payment for. Why was the only word I could manage. Arthur's work hasn't been going well, and the expenses just kept piling up, Chloe continued. Her credit card debt, the trip to Europe I promised my sister, it all just snowballed. We sold the house for $620,000. But then she paused, dabbing dramatically at the corner of her eye. It all just disappeared. We don't have a penny to our name, Mom. The numbers danced meaninglessly in my head. $620,000. That was more money than my husband and I had managed to save in our entire lives. It couldn't just disappear. It was spent. It was squandered. Arthur finally looked up, but his eyes were fixed on the rug. "I'm sorry, Mom. I let you down. We just need a place to stay, just for a few weeks until I can get back on my feet." His words, his broken tone, tugged at my motherly instincts. For a fleeting moment, I wanted to open my arms and hold my poor boy. But then, the wisdom of a woman who'd lived 70 years on this earth held me back. Something was deeply wrong here. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice from shaking. The initial shock was fading, replaced by a cold clarity. I looked straight at my son. "Get back on your feet?" I repeated, and my voice was sharp now, all the warmth gone. "What about the $40,000 debt, Arthur? The promissory note you both signed, properly notarized. It states very clearly that the loan was to be repaid in full the moment the house at 24 Oakwood Drive, Burlington, was sold." Arthur froze. It seemed he had either completely forgotten about that piece of paper, or worse, hoped that I had. But Chloe hadn't. Her patience snapped, and her pathetic mask fell away, revealing a contemptuous smirk. "Please," she said, her voice laced with acid. "That was just a formality. It's family money. Surely you're not going to actually sue your own son over it?" That sentence? It wasn't a scream. It wasn't an insult. It was the blatant contempt for my kindness. That was the last straw. I realized in that moment I wasn't just dealing with immaturity or wastefulness. I was dealing with cruelty. They hadn't just spent my money. They were trampling on my love and sacrifice. "No," I said, and my voice was like ice. I felt each word hang in the air between us. "You are not staying in my house." The argument spilled from the living room out onto the front lawn, under the curious eyes of my neighbor, Mrs. Margaret, who was tending her garden. Chloe, realizing her pity play had failed, switched to the role of the persecuted victim. "Everyone look!" she shrieked, aiming her shrill voice toward Mrs. Margaret. "A vicious mother-in-law, kicking her own son out of his only shelter, and now she wants to sue him?" I stood in my doorway, feeling the blood rush to my face with shame and anger. But I didn't back down. This was my line in the sand. "This isn't about the money, Chloe," I said, my voice quiet but every word as sharp as a razor. "It's about integrity. Robert and I worked our whole lives to build this life, to earn respect. We never took a dime from anyone. Perhaps that's a foreign concept to you." My words hit their mark. I hadn't just refused her a place to stay. I had attacked the very foundation of her life, a life built on using others. Chloe's pretty face twisted with rage. Her contempt turned into an uncontrollable fury. "You bitter old woman," she screamed. "Who do you think you are to lecture me?" And then she lunged forward. Her hand swung through the air. A sharp, dry smack echoed. My cheek burned. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the shock of seeing my son, Arthur, just stand there. Frozen, motionless. He didn't step forward to defend me. He didn't say a word in my defense. He just stood there, a coward in an expensive suit. His silence hurt more than the slap. In that instant, something inside me shifted. A mother's unconditional love gave way to something else, self-preservation. I held my stinging cheek, but my eyes no longer held pain, only a cold resolve. I calmly pulled the phone from my apron pocket. My voice was clear, without a tremor, when I spoke into the receiver. 911, dispatch. I'd like to report an assault and a breach of a financial contract. The address is 14 Elm Street. A mother's love may be endless, but my self-respect is not. And my son, and the woman he chose,
had just crossed that line. A few days later, I was sitting in David Chen's office. David was my husband Robert's best friend and had been our family's lawyer for over 30 years. His office felt like an oasis of order and reason in the chaos of my life. The oak-paneled walls, the smell of old paper and leather, and David's own serious but trustworthy face gave me a fragile sense of security.
I hadn't come here to cry or complain. The tears had fallen that first night, but now they were dry, leaving behind a steely determination. I had prepared a neat file. Inside was a copy of the notarized promissory note, the police report from the assault, and a detailed written account of that day's conversation. I'd been a school teacher for 40 years. Organization and logic are second nature to me. I placed the folder on the polished mahogany desk. "David," I said, my voice steady, "I want you to file a civil suit immediately, breach of contract, for the full $40,000 plus interest and all legal fees." David reviewed the documents carefully, his reading glasses perched on his nose. He nodded. "The paperwork is ironclad, Eleanor. We'll absolutely win. Legally, this is a clear-cut case." He looked up at me, his eyes filled with concern. "But it's you I'm worried about. And I'm also worried about the larger, missing sum. $600,000 doesn't just evaporate." "That's what I was thinking," I replied. "But right now, I can only focus on what I can prove." "I understand," David said, "but to make sure any judgment from the court can be enforced, we need to know what other assets they have. I suggest we hire a private investigator, a good one. We need to find out where that money went and if there's anything left to recover." "An investigator, David?" I asked, an unsettling feeling rising up inside me. "To investigate who? Arthur is my son." David nodded, his eyes full of understanding. "I know, Ellie, I know. And this lawsuit is in both their names. But let's look at the facts. Who was the one living the lavish lifestyle? Who was the one who slapped you? Who was the one who scoffed when you mentioned the loan? It was Chloe." He was right. Throughout this whole tragedy, Arthur had played the part of the poor husband, the pitiful son caught in the middle. It was Chloe who was aggressive, Chloe who showed all the contempt. "In my experience," David continued, "when a couple gets into this much financial trouble, there's usually one person who's the source. The other is either a co-conspirator or another victim. To start, we need to identify what assets they have to satisfy a judgment, and the most effective way is to focus on the one most likely to be hiding assets. That's Chloe." I sighed, feeling a small bit of relief at not having to aim the spear directly at my own son. Even after his betrayal, a part of my mother's heart still wanted to believe he was just a victim, that he'd been blinded by that woman. "All right, David," I agreed. "Let's start with Chloe. Find out about her. Find out where the money went." The weeks that followed passed in a tense silence. Life in Maple Creek went on as usual, the friendly greetings at the post office, the sound of church bells on Sunday morning, but for me, a gray cloud hung over everything. The civil suit was filed. I imagined a process server, a stranger, handing the summons to Arthur and Chloe at the front desk of some cheap motel off the highway. The image brought me no satisfaction, only a deep, profound sadness. How did it ever come to this? David informed me that they had hired a lawyer. A real legal battle had begun. Phone calls between law offices, letters going back and forth with cold legal terms. I felt like an outsider in my own tragedy, just a name on an official document. While the lawyers postured, another, quieter investigation was underway. David had hired Mark, a private investigator he described as the best in the business. Mark was a quiet, middle-aged man with eyes that seemed to see right through you. And after only a week, he had his first findings. I sat in David's office listening to Mark's report over the speakerphone. "Mrs. Vance, Mr. Chen," Mark's flat voice came through the speaker. "I haven't found any major assets in their names, but there is something very noteworthy. Your daughter-in-law, Chloe Vance, is drowning in debt. Her total credit card debt amounts to nearly $300,000. I was speechless. $300,000. The number was absurd.
How could she possibly owe that much? I stammered.
Mostly luxury goods, travel. But there's one large, unusual item, Mark continued. About a year ago, she paid off a single credit card balance of over $80,000 in one lump sum. The source of the funds is unclear. And more recently, there was a single transfer of exactly $300,000 from their joint account. The recipient is listed as Elysian Imports Investment Fund. David looked at me. Ellie, this could be the key. I'll have our lawyer provide full financial statements and information on this so-called Elysian Imports during discovery. It's our legal right in a civil suit. Go ahead, David, I replied. I didn't know that this simple legal move was the same as poking a hornet's nest. Everything seemed to be moving in the right direction, following a slow but steady legal process. I thought all I needed was patience. I thought this battle would only be fought on paper. I was wrong. The real nightmare began on a Tuesday night. I was asleep when a deafening crash tore through the night, making my heart stop. I bolted upright in bed, my whole body trembling. Tiptoeing downstairs, I heard the crunch of broken glass under my slippers. The living room window, where the morning sun had shone just a few weeks before, was now a jagged, gaping hole. In the middle of the floor was a brick. It was wrapped in a page from the local newspaper, and on it, someone had scrawled in black marker, "Drop the lawsuit, old woman." An icy fear crept through my body. This wasn't just a family dispute anymore. There was another force at play, something anonymous and threatening. The next morning, Arthur rushed to my house, even before the police arrived to take a report. He looked absolutely frantic, but this time I looked closer. There was something artificial in his eyes, a calculation hidden behind the tears. He threw his arms around me in a hug that felt both crushing and cold. "Mom, are you okay? I'm so sorry this is happening to you," he sobbed into my shoulder. "Don't you see? It's because of the lawsuit. These are not good people. They're retaliating. Mom, please drop the suit. You're in danger." He pulled back, gripping my hands, his tear-filled eyes pleading with me. Or you could let me move back in here. I'll stay here and protect you. If I'm here, they won't dare try anything." "Who is they?" I asked, my head spinning. I was just suing to get back what was mine. How did things turn into this? "The DeVilles. Elysian Imports is their company. Your lawyer demanded to see their books. I warned you. They'll do anything to stop you. Please drop the suit. Julian DeVille is not a man you can mess with." He was rambling now, the words tumbling out. "I told Chloe 100 times not to make them angry. You don't know Julian DeVille. He's not a normal businessman. They say his last partner, a guy who tried to sue him, had a tragic car accident just a week before the trial. Your lawsuit, it's scaring them. They're afraid of being exposed. Drop it, please. You're dealing with devils in business suits." "Mom, listen to me," he said, his voice dropping to a desperate whisper. "I know I messed up, but your safety is what matters now. Please, just let me move in with you until this is all over." And then I understood. Amid the fear and chaos, a cold spark of truth ignited. That offer. Let me move back in here. It wasn't an offer of protection. It was a demand. It was their endgame all along. My fear didn't disappear, but it made way for a suspicion that was even more terrifying. They didn't just want the money. They wanted this house. I looked deep into my son's eyes, trying to find the boy I once loved. But all I saw was a stranger, acting out a perfect scene. "I need time to think, Arthur," I said, my voice hoarse. I gently pulled my hands away. "You should go. I'll be fine." The next day, I went to see David. The fear was still there, but my stubborn streak wouldn't let me surrender. "David, I'm truly scared," I admitted, my hand trembling as I set my teacup down. "Arthur told me about a family named DeVille. He says they're behind Elysian Imports and that they are incredibly dangerous." David listened intently. "Ellie, people like that rely on fear.
But we can't act blindly. I'm going to have Mark do something.
He picked up the phone and called Mark. Mark, put the asset search on hold. I have a new assignment for you. I want you to investigate a man named Julian DeVille and his daughter, Sophia, in Boston. Find out everything you can about them and this Elysian Imports Fund. I want to know who our enemy is. A week later, I was back in David's office. This time, the air was thick with tension. Mark was on the speakerphone again. Mr. Chen, Mrs. Vance. Mark's voice came through, steady but heavy with meaning. I've done a thorough check. There is no influential businessman named Julian DeVille in Boston. The investment fund, Elysian Imports, is a ghost. I held my breath. The stories your son told you about this family, they're not real. There are no police or press reports that match those descriptions from the last 5 years. Mark paused for a beat before delivering the final blow. To put it simply, the DeVille family doesn't exist. They're a figment of the imagination. Silence filled the room. The entire act had collapsed. The threats, the fear, it was all a lie. A lie constructed by my son. But why? I whispered, not to David, but to myself. That is the question, David said, his gaze grim. And Mark found the answer. While investigating Elysian Imports, ghost company or not, Mark continued, we found the digital trail of that $300,000 transfer. It wasn't routed to an investment fund. It was laundered through several complex crypto transactions. The company is linked to a sophisticated network involved in money laundering and real estate fraud. They specialize in targeting properties in small, quiet towns. David and I looked at each other, my heart hammering in my chest. But here's the kicker, Mark went on. We managed to trace one of their crypto transactions, a large wire order. The transaction was executed from an IP address registered to your son's old office, Vance and Associates in Burlington. The silence in the room was absolute. I could hear the tick-tock of the grandfather clock counting out the seconds of my shattered life. My son, not a victim, not a forced accomplice. He was part of it. That night, I couldn't sleep. A fuzzy memory kept nagging at me, something Robert had said long, long ago. I took a flashlight and went down to the basement. The damp air and the dusty smell of the past enveloped me. I opened old cardboard boxes, keepsakes from Arthur's college days he'd never bothered to collect. Textbooks, diplomas, trinkets. And then, I found it. Tucked inside an old architecture book was a copy of the original blueprints for our house. But something was different. On the yellowed paper were new, handwritten pencil marks. Arrows, circles, and scribbled notes. My eyes locked onto the words. Reinforced wall, possible to breach. Hollow space behind fireplace. Old wine cellar access. I shined the flashlight on the old brick wall at the far end of the basement, behind the defunct British. My hand trembled as I tapped on the surface. The sound came back hollow as my life felt right now. I understood everything. A truth so horrible, so absurd, it was impossible to believe. It wasn't my money he needed. It wasn't my pity. He needed the house itself, the secrets hidden within its walls. Standing there in the cold darkness of my basement, I realized I wasn't just fighting for $40,000 anymore. I was fighting for my home, for my memories, and maybe for my life. My little civil suit had accidentally ripped a hole in a curtain, revealing a monster hiding behind it. And that monster had my son's face. The next day, I drove to Burlington, to David's office. I didn't feel fear or pain anymore. A cold calm had settled over me. The hurt was still there, a block of ice smoldering in my chest, but it was compacted now, making way for a single purpose, to bring the truth to light. I spread the blueprints out on David's mahogany desk. He looked at the handwritten marks, then up at me, his eyes filled with horror and pity. David, I said, my voice surprisingly firm. This isn't a civil suit anymore. We're dealing with something much, much bigger. I need you to help me contact the right people.
David didn't hesitate. He picked up the phone. The FBI office in Burlington was a stark contrast to the cozy, classic feel of David's firm. It was cold, modern, all glass and steel. We sat in a sterile conference room across from a woman named Agent Harris. She was in her 40s, sharp, decisive, with eyes that could see through any facade. I told my story again. This time I left nothing out. From the promissory note, to the slap, to the brick through my window, to the blueprint in my basement. David filled in the details from Mark the investigator's report. Agent Harris listened intently, never interrupting. When I finished, she looked at me with undisguised respect. "Mrs. Vance," she said, her tone professional but laced with empathy, "your $40,000 lawsuit may have accidentally kicked a giant hornet's nest. Your son, Arthur Vance, we've suspected his involvement in a financial crime ring we call the Architects for some time. They specialize in using old properties with unique structures to launder money and hide contraband. But he's smart, always using other people as a front. We've never had the direct evidence to move on him." She paused, looking me straight in the eye. "Thank you. This blueprint, combined with your testimony, gives us what we've needed. As of now, the FBI is officially taking over this investigation. Your civil case will be put on hold." "What do I do?" I asked. "You go home, and you act as if nothing has changed," Harris replied. "We need him to let his guard down. And Mrs. Vance, we may need your help again. Would you be willing?" "I'll do whatever it takes," I answered, without a shred of hesitation. I wasn't fighting for myself anymore. I was fighting for Robert's memory, for the peace of this town, and to stop the monster I had unwittingly created. The next few days were the most tense of my entire life. My home, my fortress of peace, was transformed into a secret command center. Strangers in plain clothes moved silently in and out, installing equipment I didn't recognize. Cameras the size of a pinhead were hidden in decorations, microphones placed behind paintings. I felt like I was living in a spy movie, but the fear was very, very real. Then the day came. Following Agent Harris's instructions, I made one last call to Arthur. I sat in my own living room knowing every word was being recorded. I had to draw on a lifetime of a mother's acting, a lifetime of hiding my own worries to soothe my child's. I took a deep breath and dialed. "Arthur," I began, my voice trembling, filled with exhaustion and surrender. "It's me. I've thought it over. You were right. I can't go up against these DeVille people. I'm too old, and I'm just too tired." I heard a pause on the other end of the line, the silence of a predator listening intently. "I'll drop the lawsuit," I continued, letting my voice break into a sob. "I'll sign an agreement, but I have one condition. I want you and Chloe to come here tomorrow morning, alone. We need to talk face to face, no lawyers. I want to give you something worth more than that $40,000. Think of it as a guarantee for your future, so you can start over and so I can have my peace." I knew I had struck at their greed. Something worth more? They wouldn't be able to resist. "Are you serious, Mom?" Arthur's voice came back, filled with manufactured hope and relief. "Oh, Mom, I knew you'd understand. Okay, we'll be there. 10 o'clock tomorrow morning." He took the bait. The next morning, their black SUV pulled into my driveway. Arthur and Chloe walked in. Chloe still wore that arrogant look, her arms crossed over her chest as if she were doing me a favor just by showing up. Arthur, on the other hand, was still playing the part of the dutiful son, his face a mask of gratitude and remorse. "Mom, thank you," he said, moving to hug me, but I took a step back. We sat in the living room. Agent Harris's team was watching from a van parked down the street. "I'll drop the lawsuit," I said plainly, placing a stack of blank papers on the table, a prop from the FBI. "And I will never mention the DeVille family again. In return, I want peace." Chloe scoffed. "What about the something of more value? What was that all about?" I looked her straight in the eye, then turned to Arthur, who was still pretending to be worried about me. "Before I give it to you, I need to understand something. $620,000.
Where did it go, Arthur? Did Chloe really spend it all on jewelry and trips? Arthur sighed, shaking his head in a show of sorrow. Mom, I already told you. No, you haven't told me everything, I cut in, my voice growing sharp. My investigator found Chloe's massive credit card debt, but he also found a $300,000 transfer to an investment fund called Elysian Imports. Chloe's face paled slightly, but Arthur was quick to jump in. That was the DeVilles, he said, his voice full of feigned bitterness. That's the money Chloe got scammed out of. That's what started all this trouble. Is that so? I said, my voice eerily calm. I stood up and walked to the old wooden cabinet in the corner. I thought so too, until I found this. I opened the drawer, pulled out the marked-up blueprint of the house, and spread it on the table. This is the original blueprint of the house. Your father and I found it when we first bought the place, I said. Your father used to tell me stories about how it was built on the foundation of an older house from the Prohibition era, one with a system of secret tunnels. I pointed to the new pencil marks. But these notes, reinforced wall, hollow space, old wine cellar access, this isn't your father's handwriting. This is your handwriting, Arthur. I'd recognize it anywhere. Chloe stared at the map, completely confused. But Arthur, for the first time, his mask cracked. His eyes widened, and real panic flashed across his face. I pressed on, giving him no time to recover. And then I wondered, why were you so interested in the basement? So I had David look into the history of this property, and he found something very interesting. I paused, locking eyes with my son. In 1928, this house was owned by a notorious bootlegger. He was arrested, but the authorities never found the gold he was rumored to have hidden. According to the old court records, it's believed that gold, worth about $600,000 at today's prices, is still hidden somewhere in the secret cellar system beneath this very house. The silence in the room was absolute. You never lost $620,000, did you, Arthur? I said, my voice finally breaking with the pain of it all. You sold your house and invented that story to have an excuse to come back here. Used $300,000 to transfer to Elysian Imports, your own ghost company, to launder and hide the money. And you needed to get into this house, not for a place to stay, but to dig, to find that gold. Chloe gaped, whipping her head toward Arthur. Gold? Arthur, you told me. Shut up, Arthur roared, and in that second, the monster was fully revealed. He wasn't acting anymore. His face was twisted with rage and failure. He looked at me with pure hatred. You were always smarter than I gave you credit for, he hissed. I should have known. I should have dealt with you from the start. My son would never say that, I whispered, the tears finally streaming down my cheeks. Your son died a long time ago, he screamed and lunged toward me. In that instant, every door and window seemed to explode inward. FBI, don't move! Armored figures swarmed in from every direction. Arthur was tackled before he could even react. He didn't fight back. He just knelt on the floor, panting, and stared at me. In his eyes, I saw no remorse, only the rage of having lost. As they led him out in handcuffs to the black FBI vehicle in my driveway, he stopped at the doorway and turned to look at me one last time. That look will haunt me for the rest of my days. It was the look of a monster realizing its creator was also its destroyer. I stood there, surrounded by the chaos of agents searching my home, but all I could feel was a hollow silence. I had won. I had brought my son to justice. But I had lost him forever. 1 year later. I sold the house in Maple Creek. I couldn't live with the ghosts there anymore. Now I have a small house on the coast of Maine. The salt air, the sound of the waves, and the cry of the gulls each morning have slowly begun to heal my soul. I don't grow roses anymore.
My new garden is filled with strong plants that can withstand the sea wind, hydrangeas, lavender, and tough, resilient dune grass. They're a lot like me.
Sometimes, when I look out at the vast ocean, I still think about Arthur. I don't know if I can ever forgive him. Probably not. But I have learned to forgive myself. I was a good mother. I loved him with everything I had. But sometimes, love just isn't enough. I am a survivor. I am strong. And I am at peace. But in my eyes, if you look closely enough, you will always see the scar, the shadow of the son I loved before he became a monster. And I was the one who had to close the cage door.